I was still wearing my wedding dress when I heard my fiancé laughing behind the hotel suite door. But it wasn't his laugh that shattered me. It was my sister Chloe's voice. Soft, intimate, victorious. She was never the woman you truly wanted, Ryan. Then he answered with a chuckle that made my stomach turn. You were always the exciting sister. My hand slipped from the bouquet. White roses scattered across the hallway floor while my entire future collapsed in silence. I stepped backward, unable to breathe. And that was when another man saw me. Alexander Hayes, the billionaire Chloe had spent years trying to impress. He looked at my tears, then at the closed hotel door, and quietly said, "Sometimes losing the wrong man is the first step toward the life you were meant to have." Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your whole heart? If this story already touched something inside you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It truly means a lot, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Tonight, I think a lot of us may need someone to listen. People like to believe betrayal happens suddenly, like a lightning strike, like one terrible moment that destroys everything at once. But that isn't true. Real betrayal grows slowly inside a family long before anyone notices it. And in my family, it started when we were children. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Chicago with my younger sister Chloe and our parents Linda and George West. From the outside, we looked like a normal American family. My father worked for the city transportation department. My mother taught piano lessons from home. We had Christmas photos in matching sweaters and summer barbecues in the backyard like everyone else. But inside that house, there were always two different daughters. There was Chloe. And then there was me. Chloe had golden skin, bright blue eyes, and the kind of smile that made people forgive her before she even apologized. She walked into every room like she belonged there. Teachers adored her. Boys followed her around. Even strangers in grocery stores used to stop my mother and say things like, "Your younger daughter is absolutely beautiful." My mother would glow with pride every single time. I learned very early that Chloe didn't have to earn affection. I did. When Chloe forgot homework, I helped her finish it. When she crashed her first car at 19, I emptied half my savings to help repair it. When she dropped out of college for a semester after feeling emotionally overwhelmed, my parents begged me to help cover her rent. And I did. Because every time I hesitated, my mother would say the same sentence. "Chloe needs us more summer. Not wants, needs." As if my sister had been born fragile while I had been born responsible. I remember one Thanksgiving when I was 16. I had spent the entire morning helping my mother cook, while Chloe stayed upstairs talking on the phone with friends. Right before dinner, my mother accidentally dropped the pumpkin pie onto the kitchen floor. Before I could even react, she burst into tears. And somehow, within minutes, Chloe was comforting her, while I was the one cleaning the mess. That was our family dynamic. Chloe received sympathy. I received duties. By the time I reached my 30s, I had accepted that role completely. I worked as an administrative manager at a respected law firm in downtown Chicago. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. I paid my bills on time. I visited my parents every Sunday. I remembered birthdays. I handled emergencies calmly. I was dependable. And then Ryan Carter entered my life. Ryan was one of the firm's rising corporate attorneys. Tall, polished, confident. The kind of man who remembered everyone's coffee order and knew exactly how to make a room laugh. When he first started flirting with me, I honestly thought he was joking. Men like Ryan didn't usually notice women like me. Not when women like Chloe existed. But Ryan was persistent. He brought me lunch during stressful work days. He walked me to my car during snowstorms, He listened when I talked about my father's health problems. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Really seen. When he proposed to me by Lake Michigan during a winter snowfall, I cried so hard I could barely say yes. I thought my life was finally changing. I thought someone had chosen me first. At the beginning, Chloe acted thrilled about the engagement. Too thrilled. She insisted on helping me choose venues. She inserted herself into wedding appointments. She wanted to approve floral arrangements, bridesmaid dresses, even honeymoon ideas. At first, I mistook it for excitement. Now I know better. One night, about 4 months before the wedding, I walked into my parents' kitchen and found Chloe scrolling through Ryan's social media photos. She didn't notice me immediately. Her eyes lingered on a photo of Ryan wearing a dark navy suit at a corporate fundraiser. There was something strange in her expression. Not happiness, calculation. When she finally looked up, she smiled too quickly. "He cleans up well," she joked. I laughed awkwardly, but something about it unsettled me. A few weeks later, Chloe started showing up unexpectedly at places Ryan happened to be. A charity dinner, a rooftop networking event, even a company holiday party she had never been invited to before. Every time she acted casual, every time Ryan looked slightly uncomfortable, and every time I convinced myself I was imagining things. Because the alternative was unbearable. One Friday evening, Chloe came over to my apartment carrying expensive champagne. "I think we should celebrate properly," she announced. Ryan was still at work, so it was just the two of us. At some point during the evening after her second glass, Chloe leaned back against my kitchen counter and looked around my apartment silently. "You really got lucky, huh?" she said. "With what? With all this?" I frowned. "This apartment, it's rented. You know that's not what I mean." Her voice had changed slightly. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "Ryan loves you," she continued quietly. "You've got stability, a wedding, a future. Must be nice." I tried to laugh it off. "You'll have all that someday too." But Chloe's smile disappeared. "No," she said softly. "Not someday." The way she looked at me in that moment made my skin crawl. Like she wasn't admiring my life. Like she was measuring it. A month later, I overheard her talking to her best friend Vanessa during brunch. They didn't realize I was nearby. Vanessa laughed and asked, "So do you actually like Ryan?" And Chloe answered with a laugh I still hear in nightmares. "I mean, if Summer can get a man like that, imagine what I could do with him." My heart stopped. I should have confronted her right then. I should have canceled the wedding. I should have protected myself. But when you spend your entire life being told you're overreacting, you start distrusting your own instincts. So instead, I stood there frozen behind a restaurant wall, pretending not to cry. And somewhere deep inside me, a terrible feeling began to grow. Not fear that Chloe wanted Ryan, fear that my family would let her take him. After that conversation at brunch, I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. I wanted to believe Chloe's words were careless, not cruel. I wanted to believe my sister still loved me somewhere beneath her jealousy. But once doubt enters your heart, everything changes. You start noticing things you ignored before. Small things, dangerous things. Ryan began sleeping with his phone face down. That had never bothered me before, because I trusted him completely. But suddenly, I noticed how quickly he grabbed it whenever a message appeared. One night, while we were eating takeout on my couch, his phone lit up with a text notification. I only caught 2 words before he flipped it over. "You up, no name, no context." Just those 2 words. Ryan immediately smiled too casually. "Work stuff," he said. At 10:30 at night. I nodded anyway, Because that's what people like me do when we're afraid of hearing the truth. We pretend. A few days later, I stopped by my parents' house after work to bring groceries for my father. His arthritis had gotten worse that winter, and carrying heavy bags had become difficult for him. As I walked into the kitchen, I heard my mother laughing softly with Chloe. Then my mother said something strange. "Well, just be careful. Summer can't find out before the wedding." I froze. Every muscle in my body locked. Chloe's voice immediately dropped to a whisper. "Mom?" "What? I'm serious." Then silence. I stepped into the kitchen, pretending I hadn't heard anything. My mother startled so hard she nearly dropped her coffee mug. Chloe looked pale for half a second before quickly smiling. "Hey, sis." The air felt wrong. Heavy. Artificial. I forced myself to smile back, while my heart hammered painfully against my ribs. "What can't I find out?" I asked lightly. Neither of them answered fast enough. Finally, Chloe laughed. "Oh my God, Mom was just talking about my Botox appointment." My mother nodded too quickly. "Yes. That." I stared at them. Botox. My mother had never even used the word Botox in her life. But again, I swallowed my instincts because deep down I was terrified they were right. Terrified that finding out the truth would destroy me. Over the next few weeks, Ryan changed in ways that were impossible to ignore. He stopped asking about wedding plans. He forgot our cake tasting appointment. He canceled date nights because of late meetings. When I tried to talk about our honeymoon in Napa Valley, he barely looked up from his laptop. "You're obsessing over details," he muttered. I remember sitting there silently staring at the man who once spent 40 minutes helping me choose paint samples for my apartment wall because he said my opinions mattered. That version of Ryan was disappearing, and I didn't understand why. One Friday evening, I came home exhausted after a 12-hour workday and found Ryan already at my apartment. For a moment, I felt relieved. Maybe things were finally normal again. Then I noticed he seemed nervous, almost agitated. "You okay?" I asked. "Fine." But he wouldn't look directly at me. While he showered, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter beside me. I wasn't trying to snoop. I swear I wasn't. But Chloe's name flashed across the screen. My stomach dropped instantly. The message preview appeared before disappearing. Last night that was all I saw. Ryan rushed out of the bathroom so fast, he nearly slipped on the hardwood floor. He grabbed the phone immediately. I stared at him. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he exhaled sharply. Chloe's helping plan the bachelor party surprise. The lie came too quickly, too smoothly, and for the first time in our relationship, I looked at him and saw a stranger. That night, after he fell asleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling until sunrise. Every memory began rearranging itself inside my head. Every strange glance, every awkward silence, every unexplained coincidence. I started remembering things I had ignored because love made me stupid. Like the afternoon Chloe showed up wearing the exact same perfume Ryan once said drove him crazy. Or the time Ryan defended Chloe during an argument so aggressively that even my father looked uncomfortable. Or the Christmas party where I caught them standing too close together near the balcony, while Chloe touched his tie and laughed softly. At the time, I told myself they were family now. Now, I wondered how long they had been humiliating me. The next Monday, my coworker Martha cornered me near the office elevators. Martha Collins was in her 60s and had worked at the law firm longer than anyone else. She had the sharp instincts of a woman who had survived 2 divorces and 30 years of corporate politics. She studied my face quietly. "What's going on with you?" I forced a smile. Nothing. Summer. Her voice softened. That man is making you miserable. I looked down immediately because I knew if I met her eyes, I'd start crying right there in the hallway. Martha sighed gently. I've seen Ryan around Chloe. My chest tightened. What do you mean they act? She hesitated carefully. Too familiar. I felt physically sick. Martha touched my arm. I could be wrong, but we both knew she wasn't. That same evening, I drove to my parents' house unexpectedly because my father had forgotten his medication at my apartment. When I walked through the front door, I heard voices coming from the dining room. Ryan's voice, Chloe's laughter. I stopped cold. Why was Ryan there without telling me? I moved quietly toward the hallway. Then I heard Chloe say something that made my blood run cold. She suspects something. Ryan cursed under his breath. You said she wouldn't. I know, my sister Chloe replied. She always doubts herself first. The cruelty in her voice shattered something inside me. Not because she betrayed me, because she knew exactly how to manipulate my heart. My hand trembled against the wall. Then my mother spoke. You two need to keep this under control until after the wedding. Silence exploded inside my head. Not after the engagement. Not stop this. Not tell the truth. Until after the wedding. My knees nearly gave out. I backed away before they could see me stumbling toward the front porch like I couldn't breathe. Snow was falling lightly outside. Chicago looked peaceful, beautiful, and meanwhile, my entire family was helping my sister sleep with my fiancé behind my back. I sat inside my car, gripping the steering wheel for nearly 20 minutes, trying not to scream. One thought repeated over and over inside my mind. They all knew. Not just Chloe, not just Ryan. My mother knew. Maybe even my father. And somehow I was still the fool smiling at wedding invitations, while everyone else watched my life collapse in slow motion. But the worst part, even then, I still loved them enough to hope there was another explanation. That was the tragedy of women like me. We stay loyal long after everyone else stops deserving it. The night before my wedding, Chicago was drowning in rain. Heavy rain. The kind that blurred streetlights into gold smears across wet pavement and made the city feel lonely no matter how crowded it was. I remember staring out my apartment window while fastening the small pearl earrings my grandmother had left me before she died. They were supposed to be my something old. I had dreamed about wearing them on my wedding day since I was 23. Back then, I thought love was simple. You met someone good. You built a life together. You stayed loyal. I didn't understand yet that loyalty means nothing to people who only love themselves. Ryan had texted me earlier that evening. Staying at the hotel tonight with the guys. Big day tomorrow? Love you. The smiley face made me sick now, but at the time, I still wanted to believe him. Even after everything, that was the humiliating part. Part of me still hoped I was wrong. Around 9:30 that night, I realized Ryan had accidentally left behind the leather garment bag, carrying his tuxedo cufflinks and custom watch. I stared at the bag sitting beside my couch for several minutes. A normal bride would have called him, but something inside me whispered, "Go yourself." Maybe I already knew. Maybe women always know before they admit it. The hotel was downtown, overlooking the Chicago River. Elegant, expensive, the kind of place Chloe constantly posted about online, even though she could never afford to stay there herself. Rain soaked the hem of my coat as I crossed the lobby. Everything inside smelled like marble perfume and money. I remember the receptionist smiling warmly. "Wedding weekend?" she asked. I forced a smile. Yes. God, I almost feel sorry for that version of me now. The elevator ride to the penthouse floor felt endless. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked pale and exhausted. Not like a bride. Like a woman walking toward her own funeral. Ryan's suite door was slightly open when I reached the hallway. At first, I only heard laughter. Then, Chloe's voice. Low, intimate. My entire body froze instantly. I moved closer without meaning to. And then I heard him. Ryan. Laughing softly in the way he used to laugh while kissing my forehead. You know what the funny part is? He said. What Chloe whispered. She still thinks I'm marrying her tomorrow. My heart stopped. Actually stopped. The hallway tilted beneath me. Then Chloe laughed. Not nervous, not guilty, victorious. She was always too easy to fool. I pushed the door open before I could stop myself. The room went silent immediately. Ryan was sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, wearing only dress pants. Chloe stood beside him in a silk robe I recognized instantly, because I had helped her buy it last Christmas. For one horrifying second, none of us moved. Rain hammered the windows behind them. The city lights glowed cold against Chloe's bare shoulders. Ryan stood up first. Summer, I couldn't breathe. I looked at Chloe. Then Ryan. Then Chloe again. My voice came out shaking. How long? Neither answered. That silence told me everything. I dropped the garment bag onto the floor. You were sleeping with my sister. Ryan rubbed his face aggressively. It just happened. Chloe rolled her eyes. Oh my God, don't say it like we committed murder. I stared at her in disbelief. You're my sister, and you're dramatic. The cruelty in her voice hit harder than the betrayal itself. I looked at Ryan, desperately waiting for shame, for regret, for anything human. Instead, he sighed, like I was inconveniencing him. Summer, this marriage wasn't working. My knees almost gave out. Tomorrow, I whispered. You were going to marry me tomorrow. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. Then Chloe crossed her arms and looked at me with open irritation. You want the truth? I could barely nod. She tilted her head slightly. You were never the exciting one, Summer. Every word landed like broken glass. Ryan was bored. You're predictable. Safe. Comfortable. Tears blurred my vision instantly. Chloe continued anyway. You know what your problem is? You think being good makes you special. I stared at her, horrified. This is my wedding. No, she snapped coldly. It was your fantasy. Ryan tried stepping closer. Summer, calm down. Don't touch me. My voice cracked so violently that even he stopped moving. Then something even worse happened. The hotel door opened wider behind me, and my mother walked in. Linda West took one look at the room and immediately understood everything. I waited for outrage, for disgust, for motherhood. Instead, her face filled with panic. Not panic for me, panic for Chloe. Oh my God, she whispered. Summer? I stared at her. You knew? She hesitated. That hesitation destroyed whatever remained of my heart. Mom, Chloe said quietly. Please handle this. Handle this. Like I was the problem to manage. My mother stepped toward me carefully. Honey, listen to me. No, please don't make a scene. A scene. I laughed then. Actually laughed. Because suddenly everything became clear. The lies, the secrecy, the way my mother protected Chloe no matter who got hurt. You knew they were sleeping together. My mother started crying immediately. Summer, it was complicated. Complicated. Ryan looked uncomfortable now, but not guilty enough. Never guilty enough. My mother grabbed my wrist. If you call off the wedding now, people will ask questions. I stared at her hand touching me. Cold. Unreal. You care more about embarrassment than me? That's not fair. Fair, I shouted. My voice echoed violently through the suite. Finally, my father appeared behind my mother. George West looked exhausted, small, ashamed, but even then he couldn't fully meet my eyes. That hurt almost more than Chloe. Because my father loved me. I know he did. But weak men can still destroy you. Dad, I whispered. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Nothing. No defense. No protection. Just silence. And suddenly, I understood my entire life in one terrible moment. Chloe had never stolen things from me because she was stronger. She stole them because everyone kept letting her. I looked around the suite one last time. The champagne, the ruined wedding clothes, my sister wearing that silk robe, Ryan standing there like a coward, my mother crying for the wrong daughter. And I realized something horrifying. Nobody in that room loved me enough to stop hurting me. Not one of them. I backed away slowly. My mother reached for me again. Summer, please. We can fix this. I looked directly at her through tears. No, I said quietly. You can't. Then I turned and walked out. Not because I was strong. Because if I stayed another second, I thought I might completely break apart. The hallway felt freezing cold against my skin. My chest hurt so badly I could barely breathe. I stumbled toward the elevators, blindly wiping tears with trembling hands. And then, halfway down the corridor, I crashed directly into someone. A tall man steadied me instantly before I fell. Careful. Deep voice. Calm voice. I looked up through blurred vision. Alexander Hayes, the billionaire Chloe had chased for years. He recognized me immediately. His eyes moved briefly toward the hotel suite behind me. Then back to my face. And somehow he understood. I saw it happen in his expression. The realization. The pity. The anger. Not at me, at them. And for the first time that night, someone looked at my pain like it mattered. I don't remember driving home from the hotel. To this day, there are entire pieces of that night missing from my memory. Trauma does that sometimes. It protects you by stealing moments your heart can't survive twice. What I do remember is sitting on my bathroom floor at 3 a.m, still wearing my coat, staring at my engagement ring under the yellow light above the sink. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept hearing Chloe's voice inside my head. You were never the exciting one. It replayed over and over like a curse. At some point, my phone began vibrating nonstop beside me. Texts, calls, voicemails. Ryan, Mom, Chloe, even my father once. I ignored every single one. Until finally, around 4:30 in the morning, my mother left a voicemail that shattered whatever hope I still had left. Summer, please call me back before you do something irrational. I remember staring at the phone in disbelief. Irrational. Not heartbroken. Not betrayed. Not devastated. I was irrational for reacting to my fiancé sleeping with my sister the night before my wedding. That was when something inside me finally started turning cold. The next morning was supposed to be my wedding day. Instead, I sat in silence, watching gray rain slide down my apartment windows, while my unopened bridal gown hung near the bedroom door, like a ghost. At 11 o'clock, Martha arrived carrying coffee and cinnamon rolls. The second she saw my face, she stopped smiling. Oh, sweetheart. That was all she said before I completely fell apart. I cried harder than I ever had in my entire life. Ugly crying, humiliating crying, the kind that leaves your chest aching for hours. Martha sat beside me on the couch and let me cry until I could breathe again. Then quietly, she asked, "What happened?" And for the first time, I said it out loud. Ryan was sleeping with Chloe. Martha closed her eyes briefly, like even she needed a second to process that level of cruelty. Oh, Summer. My mother knew. That part seemed to anger her more than the affair itself. She what? I nodded slowly. She wanted me to go through with the wedding to avoid embarrassing Chloe. Martha stared at me in horrified silence. Then she muttered something under her breath that I won't repeat. Around noon, my phone started exploding again. This time, it wasn't family. It was guests, friends, co-workers, people confused about why the wedding venue suddenly announced a private delay. Ryan hadn't told anyone the truth. Of course he hadn't. Men like Ryan protect their reputation before anything else. Then social media made everything worse. Because Chloe posted a photo, not directly with Ryan. Nothing obvious. Just a mirror selfie from the hotel's suite bathroom, wearing silk pajamas, with the caption, "Funny how life changes overnight." Vanessa commented underneath, "Some women just know how to win." I stared at my phone so long, my vision blurred. They were enjoying this. Actually, enjoying it. My humiliation had become entertainment. Martha gently took my phone from my hands. "You need to stop looking." But I couldn't. Pain becomes addictive when you're trying to understand how people you loved turned into strangers. By late afternoon, my mother finally showed up at my apartment uninvited. The second I opened the door, she burst into tears dramatically. "Summer, thank God." I stepped back silently and let her in. Not because I wanted comfort, because I wanted answers. My mother sat on the couch twisting tissues between trembling fingers. "You have to understand, Chloe didn't mean for this to happen." I actually laughed. A sharp, broken laugh. "She accidentally slept with my fiancé." Linda flinched. "Don't be cruel. Cruel." Again, somehow I was the cruel one. "Mom," I whispered, "what is wrong with you?" She immediately became defensive. "You've always been stronger than Chloe." There it is. Her face hardened slightly. "She's emotional, impulsive. You know how she is." "And what am I?" Linda looked confused by the question. "You're dependable." I stared at her for several seconds. That word. My entire life reduced to that word. Dependable. Not lovable. Not precious. Not cherished. Useful. I sat down slowly across from her. "When did you find out my mother looked away?" "A few weeks ago." The room spun slightly. Weeks. They all watched me plan my wedding for weeks. "You let me send invitations?" Silence. "You let me buy a dress?" Tears rolled down her cheeks again. "You let me stand there excited about my future, while everyone knew I was being humiliated." "Summer." "No." My voice cracked violently. "You don't get to cry harder than me." That finally silenced her. For the first time in my life, my mother looked almost afraid of me. Not because I was screaming, because I wasn't. I had gone frighteningly calm. Then she said something that permanently changed the way I saw her. "Ryan made a mistake. Men do that sometimes." I physically recoiled. A mistake. "You're throwing your whole future away over one terrible choice." One terrible choice. As if betrayal were a traffic violation. I looked at this woman, my mother, and suddenly realized she would have sacrificed my happiness forever if it protected Chloe from consequences. That realization hurt more than Ryan, because mothers are supposed to protect daughters. Mine offered me up like collateral. Then came the knock at my apartment door. Before I could move, Ryan walked in holding flowers. Flowers? I actually thought I might lose my mind. Martha stood immediately. "You have 5 seconds before I call security." Ryan ignored her completely and looked at me instead. His eyes were tired, but not devastated enough. Never devastated enough. Summer, can we talk privately? No. He stepped closer anyway. Please. My mother stood up quickly. Yes, you two need to work this out maturely. I looked between them in disbelief. They really expected me to fix this. Ryan rubbed his jaw anxiously. What happened with Chloe? It got out of control. I stared at him. You cheated on me with my sister. It wasn't supposed to happen. Then why did it? He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything again. Because honest people answer immediately. Finally, he sighed heavily. You and I became predictable. I felt something inside my chest collapse quietly. You were safe, Summer, comfortable, but Chloe? He stopped, but he didn't need to finish. I already knew. Exciting, fun, dangerous. I looked down at the engagement ring still on my finger, then slowly removed it. Ryan's eyes widened. Don't do this emotionally. Emotionally. God. I walked over and placed the ring into his palm. I loved you, I whispered. For the first time, he actually looked uncomfortable. Maybe because I sounded sincere. Maybe because he knew he never deserved it. Then Chloe appeared in the apartment doorway, uninvited, wearing oversized sunglasses and expensive boots like she was entering a movie scene instead of her sister's ruined life. Ryan, we should go. I stared at her in disbelief. She didn't even look ashamed. In fact, she looked irritated. Then she glanced around my apartment and sighed dramatically. You're making this way bigger than it needed to be, Martha muttered. Oh, I'm gonna end up in prison today. Chloe crossed her arms. You know what, Ryan and I didn't plan this. People fall in love. I felt physically sick. You betrayed me. You don't own him. No, I whispered. But I trusted you. For the first time, something flickered across Chloe's face. Not guilt, annoyance. Like my pain was exhausting her. Then she reached for Ryan's hand openly right in front of me. And that was the exact moment something finally died inside me. Not my love for Ryan. Not even my love for Chloe. My need for their approval. For the next 2 weeks, I barely left my apartment. Chicago kept moving without me. People went to work. Couples held hands on sidewalks. Coffee shops stayed crowded. Meanwhile, my life felt frozen somewhere between humiliation and grief. The worst part about betrayal isn't the heartbreak. It's the embarrassment. The constant replaying of every moment in your mind. Every lie you missed. Every warning sign you ignored. Every room where people probably pitied you behind your back. I stopped answering most phone calls. I ignored messages from relatives pretending to be concerned. Even my father's texts stayed unread. Only Martha continued showing up consistently, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with wine, sometimes just with silence. And honestly, silence helped more than advice. One Thursday afternoon, while I sat wrapped in a blanket staring at daytime television, I wasn't even watching. Martha walked into my apartment holding an envelope. You've been invited somewhere? I'm not going anywhere. Yes, you are. She dropped the envelope onto my lap. It was an invitation to the Hayes Foundation Winter Gala. My stomach tightened immediately. The Hayes Foundation was one of the biggest charitable organizations in Chicago. Politicians, CEOs, old money families, everyone attended their annual events. And at the center of it all was Alexander Hayes, the billionaire Chloe had spent years obsessing over. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a handwritten note. I hope you'll come. Alexander Hayes? I stared at the signature in disbelief. Martha raised one eyebrow. Well, that's interesting. I can't go there. Yes, you can. Absolutely not. Martha crossed her arms. Summer, you have spent 2 weeks hiding like you did something shameful. I looked away immediately. That kind of humiliation doesn't disappear overnight. No, she said softly, but neither does your life. That sentence stayed with me all night. 3 days later, I found myself standing outside the ballroom entrance wearing a dark, emerald gown Martha had practically forced me to buy. I felt completely out of place. The room glittered with crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, and women who looked like they had never cried over a man in their lives. I almost turned around twice. Then I heard a calm voice behind me. "You came." I turned slowly. Alexander Hayes stood a few feet away, wearing a black tuxedo that somehow made him look even taller. At 45, he carried himself differently than younger men like Ryan. No desperation, no performance, just quiet confidence. His dark eyes studied me carefully. Not greedily, not flirtatiously, carefully. And somehow that made me more nervous. "You invited me?" I said awkwardly. A faint smile touched his mouth. "I wasn't sure you'd accept." I swallowed. To be honest, I almost didn't. I know. The strange thing about Alexander was that he never rushed his words. Every sentence sounded deliberate, controlled, like a man who had learned long ago that silence gave him power. He offered me his arm. "Walk with me." The entire ballroom noticed us immediately. I felt it. The stares, the whispers. And suddenly I understood exactly why Chloe had always chased this man. Alexander Hayes didn't enter rooms. Rooms reacted to him. As we walked past tables filled with wealthy donors and city officials, people greeted him constantly. But despite all the attention, he remained focused on me. "You look uncomfortable," he said quietly. "I am uncomfortable." That actually made him smile slightly. Fair enough. We reached the balcony overlooking the Chicago River. Cold wind brushed against my face. For the first time all evening, I could breathe. Alexander leaned lightly against the railing beside me. "You hate public attention," he observed. I looked at him carefully. "How do you know that you shrink your shoulders when people stare?" The accuracy of that startled me. Most people never notice things about me at all. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then finally, I asked the question that had been bothering me since the hotel. "Why were you there that night?" Alexander's gaze shifted toward the river below. "The hotel," I nodded. "One of my investors was staying there." Of course. Men like him belonged in places like that. Then his expression darkened slightly. I didn't intend to overhear what happened. Heat flooded my face instantly. The humiliation returned all over again. "I'm sorry you had to witness that." His eyes moved back to mine immediately. "You didn't do anything shameful." Something about the certainty in his voice nearly broke me. Most people had spent the past 2 weeks acting like I was somehow partly responsible. Too emotional, too serious, too boring, too something. But Alexander looked at me like the betrayal belonged entirely to the people who caused it. That difference mattered more than he probably realized. "I know, Chloe," he said quietly. I stiffened immediately. Of course he did. Chloe had practically built a part-time career trying to get his attention over the years. "She mentioned you before Alexander gave me a dry look." "Frequently." I almost laughed bitterly. That sounds terrifying. It was exhausting. That surprised me enough to look at him fully. He continued calmly. "Your sister attended every fundraiser, every networking event, every charity dinner she could access for nearly 3 years. I stared. 3 years. She sent gifts to my office twice. I felt nauseous. She did what A watch once. Expensive whiskey another time. Oh my God. She wanted to impress me. I wrapped my arms tightly around myself against the cold. That sounds exactly like Chloe. Alexander was quiet for a moment. Then he added carefully, "She also talked about you." Something inside me tightened. What did she say? His jaw shifted slightly like he was deciding how honest to be. Finally, he answered, "She called you weak." The word hit harder than I expected. Not because it was new, because somewhere deep down, I had feared everyone secretly agreed with her. Alexander looked directly at me. I disagreed. I let out a shaky breath. "She always hated that people trusted me more than her," I whispered. "She hated that you didn't need attention to matter." I turned toward him slowly. That sentence pierced straight through me. Because nobody had ever described me that way before. Not even Ryan, especially not my family. Alexander continued looking out over the city lights. My mother had a sister like Chloe. I blinked. What she spent years trying to destroy my parents' marriage. I stared at him in shock. He spoke about it calmly, but there was old pain underneath his voice. My father eventually had an affair with her? I didn't know what to say. That's horrible. Yes. Silence settled between us again, but it no longer felt awkward. It felt understood. For the first time since the wedding disaster, I didn't feel pitied. I felt seen. Then Alexander said something unexpected. "You know what your problem is, Summer?" I gave a weak laugh. "Honestly, I think there are several." A faint smile appeared in his eyes. "You keep apologizing for other people hurting you." That sentence hit me so hard I couldn't speak. Because he was right. I apologized for crying, for asking questions, for being betrayed, for existing inconveniently inside other people's selfishness. Alexander turned toward me fully then. And for the first time since Ryan destroyed my life, a man looked at me with something that felt dangerously close to admiration instead of disappointment. After the gala, Alexander Hayes became impossible to stop thinking about. Not because he was a billionaire. Honestly, that part intimidated me more than impressed me. It was the way he looked at me, carefully. Like my words mattered. Like my pain wasn't something inconvenient to rush past. Ryan used to look at me that way once. Before Chloe. Before lies. Before I became predictable. 3 days after the gala, a large bouquet of white orchids arrived at my apartment. No romantic message. No flirtation. Just a small handwritten card. I meant what I said. Stop apologizing for surviving betrayal. Alexander. I read the note 6 times, then immediately felt ridiculous for reading it 6 times. Martha nearly screamed when she saw it. "Oh, this man is dangerous." I frowned. Dangerous. He's emotionally intelligent. That's rarer than money. Despite myself, I laughed for the first time in weeks. A real laugh. It felt strange, like using muscles I hadn't touched in years. That same evening, Alexander called. Not texted, called. His voice was calm as always. I hope the flowers weren't inappropriate. They were beautiful. A brief silence followed. "Then there's an event this Saturday." I leaned against my kitchen counter nervously. What kind of event? A children's hospital fundraiser. Of course it was. Even his billionaire activities sounded elegant. "You don't have to say yes immediately," he added. "It's not that." "Then what is it?" I hesitated, because the truth sounded pathetic. "I don't think I'm ready for people staring at me again." Alexander's voice softened slightly. "Then don't go for them." That sentence lingered inside me long after the call ended. Saturday arrived cold and bright. I changed outfits 4 times before finally settling on a navy blue dress Martha approved with dramatic satisfaction. "You look expensive," she declared proudly. "I don't know what that means." "It means Chloe will hate it." Oddly enough, that helped. The fundraiser took place inside one of Chicago's historic art museums. Reporters waited outside. Cameras flashed constantly. The second Alexander stepped out of the car beside me, attention shifted instantly. And when people realized I was with him, the whispers started immediately. I heard my name twice before we even reached the entrance. Isn't that the woman whose fiancé left her? No, her sister stole him? I almost turned around. Then, Alexander quietly placed one hand against the small of my back. Not possessive. Steadying. You don't owe strangers your shame, he murmured. Something about that gave me enough strength to keep walking. Inside the event glittered with politicians, athletes, CEOs, and socialites dressed in diamonds worth more than my apartment. I felt painfully out of place again. But Alexander never once acted embarrassed by me. Not once. He introduced me calmly to everyone beside him. This is Summer West. Not the woman with the cheating fiancé. Not the poor thing everyone pities. Just Summer. And somehow that simple respect felt revolutionary. At one point during dinner, I excused myself to the restroom. The moment I stepped into the hallway, I heard a familiar voice. Chloe. My stomach tightened instantly. She stood near the bar, wearing a silver gown so tight it barely looked breathable. Vanessa Reed stood beside her, sipping champagne. The second Chloe saw me, surprise flashed across her face. Then calculation replaced it. Well, she said slowly, this is unexpected. I should have walked away. But I was tired of walking away. Hello, Chloe. Her eyes scanned my dress carefully. You clean up nicely. Vanessa smirked into her glass. I ignored her. What are you doing here? Chloe asked. I was invited. She laughed lightly. To this, I finally understood something important about my sister in that moment. Chloe believed wealth was intimacy. She thought proximity to rich people meant belonging. And Alexander Hayes was the ultimate trophy she had never managed to win. Then her expression changed suddenly. Because Alexander appeared behind me. Summer. His voice alone altered the entire atmosphere. Vanessa straightened immediately. Chloe's posture shifted subtly, performative femininity. I recognized it instantly because she had used it around powerful men her entire life. Alexander, Chloe said warmly. I didn't know you'd be here tonight. Alexander's face remained perfectly neutral. I'm hosting the event. Vanessa nearly choked on her champagne, trying not to laugh at Chloe getting caught. But Chloe recovered quickly. Of course, she said smoothly. You always support amazing causes. Alexander barely acknowledged the compliment. Instead, he looked at me. Are you all right? That simple question infuriated Chloe more than if he had insulted her directly. I saw it happen. Jealousy flashed across her eyes so fast most people would have missed it, but I didn't. Because I had spent my whole life surviving her envy. I'm fine, I answered quietly. Chloe crossed her arms. So, you two came together, Alexander answered before I could. Yes. One word, calm, certain, and somehow devastating. Chloe smiled too brightly. That's surprising. Why? Alexander asked. She blinked. Well, Summer usually hates these kinds of events. I dislike fake people, I corrected softly. Vanessa suddenly became fascinated by her drink. Alexander's eyes flickered briefly toward me with what looked dangerously close to amusement. Chloe noticed. That was the moment panic entered her expression for the first time. Because suddenly, she realized something horrifying. Alexander enjoyed my company, not hers. Later that evening, during the charity auction, I caught Chloe staring at our table repeatedly from across the ballroom. Not casually, obsessively, and Ryan was there too. I hadn't noticed him at first. He stood near the back of the room, wearing a dark suit, watching me like he barely recognized me anymore. Honestly, maybe he didn't. For weeks after the betrayal, I had been drowning, begging silently for love, for explanations, for scraps of dignity. But tonight, sitting beside a man who treated me with effortless respect, I finally understood how starved I had been. Not for money, for kindness. At one point, Alexander leaned slightly closer during dinner. "You're quiet," I'm thinking. "Dangerous activity?" I smiled despite myself. Then his expression turned more serious. "You know your sister is trying to get my attention tonight." Heat rose into my face instantly. "I'm sorry." "There you go again." I looked down. "Apologizing? Again?" Alexander continued calmly. "She's been trying for years." I hesitated. "Why didn't you ever date her?" That question surprised even me. Alexander took a slow sip of whiskey before answering. "Because your sister doesn't see people." I frowned slightly. "What do you mean she sees status, access, advantage?" His eyes moved toward Chloe briefly across the ballroom. "She looks at relationships like acquisitions, the terrifying part." He was right. And deep down, I think Chloe knew he saw through her completely, which only made her want him more. Then Alexander turned toward me fully. "But you," he said quietly, "walk into rooms trying to make everyone else comfortable." My chest tightened unexpectedly. No one had ever described me that way before, not even me. And for the first time in a very long time, I wondered what it might feel like to be truly chosen by someone who understood my worth before I did. The first article appeared online the next morning. Billionaire Alexander Hayes seen cozying up to woman at center of viral wedding scandal. Underneath the headline was a photo of me standing beside Alexander outside the museum fundraiser. I looked startled. He looked calm. The comment section was vicious. Some people called me pathetic. Others accused me of using heartbreak to attract a richer man. But the worst comments came from women who recognized Chloe. "Oh, wow! Her sister lost Ryan and upgraded immediately. Guess heartbreak pays well." I stared at my phone in numb silence while shame crawled up my throat again. No matter what happened, people always found ways to blame women for surviving pain. My phone rang. Alexander. I hesitated before answering. "Are you all right?" he asked immediately. I almost laughed bitterly. "That depends. Are public executions still legal in Illinois?" His voice remained calm. "Don't read the comments." Too late. Silence. "Then you didn't do anything wrong, Summer." That should have comforted me more than it did. But years of emotional manipulation don't disappear overnight. Part of me still believed every cruel thing people said about me, especially after hearing versions of it my entire life from Chloe. That afternoon, Martha stormed into my apartment carrying takeout containers and pure rage. I swear to God, if I find Vanessa Reed in public, I couldn't help laughing. Martha sat down beside me. "She's spreading rumors, I know." Vanessa had already posted vague social media captions implying I had moved on suspiciously fast. Translation: gold digger, homewrecker, manipulative woman. The irony almost made me sick. Chloe steals my fiancé. I become the villain. Classic. Then Martha suddenly frowned at my coffee table. "What's that?" I looked down. A white designer shopping bag sat near the couch. It had arrived earlier with no note attached. Inside was a dark red silk dress. Elegant, expensive, beautiful. Martha slowly smiled. "Oh, this man is serious. I can't accept things like this." "Why?" "Because people will think she cut me off sharply." "Summer, do you hear yourself?" I looked away immediately. Because, yes, I did hear myself. Every sentence started with fear now. Fear of judgment, fear of appearing selfish, fear of taking up too much space. Martha sighed softly. You've spent your whole life shrinking yourself to make other people comfortable. That sentence followed me all evening, especially later that night when Alexander invited me to dinner. A private restaurant overlooking Lake Michigan. No photographers, no reporters. Just quiet jazz music and candlelight reflecting against dark water. For the first 20 minutes, I felt awkward holding expensive wine glasses while trying not to embarrass myself. Alexander noticed instantly. You're overthinking. I'm trying not to look out of place. You belong exactly where you are. The certainty in his voice unsettled me, because I wanted to believe him, dangerously badly. Dinner should have felt intimidating. Instead, it felt easy. We talked for hours about books, travel, his childhood in Seattle, my grandmother's old recipes. At one point, I realized something shocking. I wasn't performing. I wasn't carefully managing someone else's emotions. I was just existing. And somehow, Alexander seemed to like me more when I relaxed instead of less. Halfway through dinner, his expression shifted slightly. Your sister contacted me again? I nearly dropped my wine glass. What? She sent flowers to my office yesterday? I stared at him in horror. Oh my God. She attached a note. I covered my face briefly. Please don't tell me. Alexander's mouth twitched slightly. It said, some connections deserve a second chance. I wanted the floor to open beneath me. I'm so sorry. There you go again. Right. Apologizing. Again. Alexander leaned back calmly. Your sister has spent years trying to become the kind of woman she thinks powerful men want. I swallowed. She always thought wealth would fix whatever emptiness she feels. And did it? I laughed softly. No. For a moment, silence settled between us comfortably. Then Alexander studied me carefully. You know what's interesting? What? You never ask me how much money I have. I blinked. Should I? Most women probably would have laughed flirtatiously, but I genuinely didn't know how to answer. Alexander smiled faintly into his whiskey. Most people do. Well, I already know you're rich. That's an understatement. That dry response made me laugh unexpectedly hard, and for a second, he looked almost mesmerized watching me laugh. Not lustful, not calculating, warm. The realization made my heartbeat stumble. Then everything shattered the moment we left the restaurant. Because Chloe was waiting outside. My stomach dropped instantly. She stood beside the valet station wearing a white coat and perfect makeup despite the freezing wind. For one terrifying second, I wondered if she had followed us. Then I realized, of course she had. Chloe's eyes locked immediately onto Alexander. Not me. Never me first. Alexander, she said softly. He went completely cold beside me. Not rude, just emotionally unreachable. I'm busy. She ignored the dismissal entirely. I just wanted 5 minutes. No. The directness stunned even me. But Chloe recovered quickly. I think Summer misunderstood what happened with Ryan. I stared at her in disbelief. You cheated with my fiancé. Her jaw tightened slightly. You act like relationships are property ownership. Alexander spoke before I could answer. You should leave. Chloe's eyes flickered toward him instantly. And there it was again. That hunger, that obsession. She still wanted him, desperately. I know what people say about me, Chloe continued softly. But I think you understand ambition. Alexander looked at her calmly. No, he said. I understand character. The silence afterward felt explosive. For the first time in my entire life, I watched Chloe lose control of a conversation. Color rose into her face. I'm not the villain Summer makes me into. Alexander's expression never changed. Your sister spent years protecting your feelings. That hit Chloe visibly. She's not innocent. No, he agreed quietly. She's wounded. The difference between those two sentences changed everything, because Chloe always treated kindness like weakness. But Alexander didn't. He looked at my softness like strength. Chloe noticed that too. And I think that terrified her more than losing Ryan ever could. Then Ryan suddenly appeared across the sidewalk. My breath caught. He froze the second he saw me standing beside Alexander. The jealousy on his face was immediate, ugly, raw, like he had only just realized I could actually move on. Summer, he said sharply. Alexander stepped slightly closer beside me. Not possessive, protective. Ryan's eyes narrowed instantly. This is unbelievable. I stared at him. You cheated on me with my sister, and now you're dating him. The hypocrisy nearly made me laugh. But before I could answer, Chloe suddenly grabbed Ryan's arm. Let's go. Interesting. Very interesting. Because suddenly Chloe didn't want Ryan causing a scene, not in front of Alexander. Ryan looked between us furiously, then at Alexander. You think she's different? He snapped bitterly. You don't know her. Alexander's answer came calmly. I know enough, and somehow, hearing someone choose my dignity publicly for the first time in my life nearly made me cry right there on the sidewalk. The truth about Ryan Carter arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of a bank statement. Not mine, his. I wasn't supposed to see it. But fate has a strange way of exposing people once you finally stop protecting them. I was at work for the first time in nearly a month, trying desperately to rebuild some sense of normal life. The law firm felt different now. Too many people knew what happened. Too many sympathetic smiles followed me through the hallways. Some people pitied me. Others watched me with curiosity. Like I was a woman from a true crime documentary they had only partially finished. I hated all of it. Around noon, Martha walked into my office holding a thick folder. Her expression looked grim. Close the door. Immediately, my stomach tightened. What happened? She sat down slowly. One of the accounting managers accidentally forwarded me documents meant for Ryan. I frowned. What kind of documents? Martha slid the folder across my desk. Financial notices? Loan statements? Debt collection warnings? I stared at the pages in disbelief. Ryan owed nearly $400,000. My mouth went dry instantly. What is this? Bad investments, Martha said quietly. Very bad investments. I flipped through the documents with trembling fingers. Credit card debt, private loans, gambling transactions from online sports betting accounts. I physically stopped breathing for a second. Ryan gambled. He once lectured me for buying a $400 coffee machine because it was financially irresponsible. Meanwhile, he was drowning in secret debt. My chest tightened painfully. Then I saw something even worse. Several documents mentioned inheritance projections. My inheritance? I sat frozen. Martha watched my face carefully. He knew about your grandmother's estate, didn't he? I nodded slowly. My grandmother had left me a modest inheritance years ago. Not millions, but enough money for a future home and financial stability. Ryan knew every detail, and suddenly memories started rearranging themselves again. Questions about my savings, comments about long-term security, the way he pushed for combining finances after marriage. Oh my God. Martha exhaled softly. I'm sorry, sweetheart, but strangely, I wasn't devastated this time. I was angry, cold, angry, the kind that sharpens instead of destroys you. For weeks, I had blamed myself. Too boring, too predictable, too safe. But this was calculation. Ryan didn't choose me because he loved my stability. He chose me because he needed rescuing. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment rereading the documents while snow fell heavily outside. My phone buzzed. "Alexander, are you free for dinner?" Normally, I would have said yes immediately, but my voice sounded strange when I answered. "I found out something about Ryan." Silence. Then calmly, "Do you want company?" That simple question nearly made me cry. Not advice, not interrogation. Company. "Yes," I whispered. An hour later, Alexander arrived carrying Thai takeout and a bottle of wine. No expensive restaurant, no dramatic gestures. Just warmth. We sat at my kitchen table while I explained everything. The debts, the gambling, the inheritance documents. Alexander listened quietly without interrupting once. When I finally finished, exhaustion hit me all at once. "I feel stupid," I admitted softly. "You weren't stupid. I missed everything. You trusted someone you loved. That sounds stupid now." Alexander leaned back slightly. "No. What Ryan did was stupid." I stared down at my untouched food. Part of me keeps wondering if he ever loved me at all. The silence afterward hurt, because some questions don't have kind answers. Finally, Alexander spoke carefully. "I think Ryan loved how safe you made him feel." I looked up slowly. "That's not the same thing." "No," he agreed quietly. "It isn't." For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then he asked something unexpected. "Did Chloe know about the debt?" I blinked. "I don't know." But even as I said it, I remembered certain moments. Chloe encouraging expensive vacations. Ryan suddenly becoming desperate about networking with wealthy people. The way Chloe obsessed over Alexander even after stealing Ryan. And suddenly, something horrifying clicked into place. Oh my God. Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly. What she knew. How? I stood up abruptly, pacing across the kitchen. She had to know. Chloe never commits to anything unless there's something bigger waiting. I stopped walking slowly. She thought you were the bigger option. The realization settled heavily between us. Ryan had been the temporary prize. Alexander was the dream. And Chloe had spent years trying to position herself close enough to reach him. Alexander watched me carefully. "You sound more angry for Ryan than Chloe, because Ryan pretended to love me." My voice cracked unexpectedly. "With Chloe, at least she's always been selfish. That was the tragedy of family betrayal. Eventually, you stop expecting goodness from people who spent years proving they don't have it. But romantic betrayal, that destroys your ability to trust your own judgment." Later that evening, after dinner, Alexander stood near my apartment window, watching the snow quietly. Chicago glowed white and silver beneath the storm. "You know," he said calmly, "Ryan contacted someone in my legal department last month." I frowned. What Alexander turned toward me, he wanted investment advice. I stared at him in shock. "He what?" "He mentioned he was about to marry into future financial security." Humiliation flooded me so fast I thought I might actually collapse. Oh my God. Alexander's jaw tightened slightly. At the time, I thought he was arrogant. I wrapped my arms tightly around myself. No wonder Chloe stayed with him. Alexander studied me carefully. "You really believe that she always follows money?" "Not entirely." I frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" He hesitated briefly. "Then I think your sister wanted something else too." "What?" he answered without hesitation. "To win." The word landed heavily, because deep down, I knew he was right. Chloe didn't just steal people because she desired them. She stole them because it proved she could. And if the stolen thing belonged to me, even better. Then my phone buzzed violently against the kitchen counter. Ryan. I stared at the screen. Alexander noticed immediately. You don't have to answer. But something inside me had changed tonight. For weeks, Ryan controlled the emotional narrative. Not anymore. I answered calmly. What Ryan exhaled sharply on the other end. Can we talk, number Summer, please? You lost the right to ask me for things. Silence. Then his voice softened slightly. I made mistakes. Mistakes, I laughed coldly. You used me. That's not fair. I almost admired the audacity. You were planning to marry me while drowning in secret gambling debt. Silence exploded across the phone. Then, how do you know about that? There it was. Fear? Not guilt. Fear. I looked over at Alexander standing quietly near the window. Strong, steady, honest. And suddenly Ryan sounded very small. I know enough, I said softly. Summer, listen to me. No, you listen. For the first time since the betrayal, my voice didn't shake. You didn't break me, Ryan. He went silent immediately, because men like Ryan depend on women staying shattered. Then I hung up. My hands trembled afterward, but not from weakness, from adrenaline, from finally fighting back. Alexander watched me carefully. You're different tonight. I looked at him slowly. No, I whispered. I think I'm finally seeing clearly. And honestly, that was far more dangerous than heartbreak. Alexander Hayes proposed to me on a snowy Wednesday night. And no, it wasn't romantic. At least not at first. There were no violins, no candlelit rooftop, no dramatic speech about destiny. Just honesty. Raw, terrifying honesty. It happened nearly 3 weeks after I discovered Ryan's financial lies. By then, my relationship with Alexander had become the safest part of my life. We spoke almost every day, sometimes over dinner, sometimes during quiet, late-night phone calls, sometimes through simple text messages asking if I had eaten or slept or survived another awkward conversation with my family. No one had ever cared for me in such steady ways before. Not loudly, not performatively, just consistently. And consistency, I was learning, is its own form of love. That evening, Alexander invited me to his penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. The view was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows, dark wood, soft jazz playing quietly in the background. It should have felt intimidating. Instead, it felt peaceful, which honestly scared me more. Because peace was unfamiliar. I stood near the window watching snow drift over the city, while Alexander poured whiskey into 2 crystal glasses. You're quiet tonight, he observed. I'm thinking. About, I hesitated. Everything. He handed me a glass. Then he said something unexpected. Your sister contacted me again. I closed my eyes briefly. Please tell me she didn't send more flowers. No. I looked at him carefully. She invited me to dinner. Of course she did. The humiliation burned through me instantly, even though none of this was technically my fault. What did you say? Alexander took a slow sip of whiskey. I declined. Relief flooded me so quickly it almost embarrassed me. He noticed. You thought I wouldn't? No, I admitted quietly. I just don't understand why she won't stop. Alexander studied me calmly. Because she's losing. That answer unsettled me. Because deep down, I knew he was right. For Chloe, relationships had never been about connection. They were competitions. And somehow, despite stealing Ryan, she still felt like she hadn't won. Maybe because Ryan was no longer valuable. Or maybe because for the first time in her life, someone powerful had chosen me over her. The realization felt surreal. Alexander set his glass down carefully. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. Marry me. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because I genuinely thought I misunderstood him. What his expression never changed. Marry me, Summer. The room went completely silent. I stared at him, waiting for clarification. There wasn't any. You can't be serious. I am. My heartbeat turned violent instantly. Alexander. Before you panic, let me explain. Panic, too late. He walked closer, slowly, calm as ever. This would help both of us. I blinked rapidly. Help us. You need protection. That word hit something deep inside me. Protection. No one had ever offered me that before. Not really. Alexander continued carefully. Your family is spiraling. Ryan is desperate financially. Chloe is obsessed with public image. I swallowed hard. And you think marrying me solves that? I think it changes the balance of power. God, the terrifying part. He wasn't wrong. Every cruel person in my life operated on one belief: Summer will tolerate it. But marrying Alexander Hayes, that changed everything. Still, I shook my head immediately. This is insane. Yes, that calm agreement startled me. Alexander stepped closer. But I'm still asking. I stared at him in disbelief. Why, finally, something vulnerable flickered across his face. Not weakness, honesty. Because I care about you. The room felt smaller suddenly, dangerously smaller. I barely survived one engagement, I whispered. You think I'm emotionally prepared for another no? His answer came instantly. And I'm not asking for fantasy. That sentence slowed my breathing slightly. Alexander looked directly into my eyes. I'm asking for partnership. Something inside my chest tightened painfully. Because after a lifetime of begging for love, partnership sounded almost sacred. Still, fear rose immediately. You deserve someone better than this mess. A faint sadness touched his expression. Summer, you still think other people's cruelty determines your value. I looked away, because part of me still did. Alexander gently touched my hand. The contact felt warm, steady. I don't want to rescue you, he said quietly. I want to choose you. And that was the moment everything changed. Not because he was rich, not because he was powerful, because no one had ever said those words to me before. Choose you, not settle, not tolerate, not use. Choose. Tears burned my eyes instantly. Alexander noticed but didn't rush to comfort me. That was another thing about him. He never treated my emotions like inconveniences to silence quickly. You don't have to answer tonight, he added softly. But strangely, somewhere deep inside me, I already knew. Not because I was in love yet. Maybe not fully, but because for the first time in my life, choosing myself and choosing someone kind felt like the same decision. 3 weeks later, we got married quietly at a private estate outside Chicago. No press, no giant ballroom, no fake smiling relatives, just a small ceremony under falling snow. Martha cried harder than anyone. You better appreciate this woman, she warned Alexander afterward. I do, he answered simply, and somehow I believed him. The news exploded online within hours anyway. Billionaire Alexander Hayes marries woman from viral wedding betrayal. The public reaction was chaos. Some people called it romantic. Others called it revenge. Chloe called me 17 times in one night. I never answered. Ryan did worse. He got drunk. Then he showed up outside my apartment building at midnight, even though I no longer lived there full time. Martha called me furious. He's downstairs yelling your name like a rejected country singer. I almost laughed. Almost. Alexander, however, didn't find it amusing at all. The next morning, he calmly increased private security around both his penthouse and my office building. I stared at him across breakfast. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," he said evenly. "I did." The protectiveness in his voice startled me. Not because it felt controlling, because it felt genuine. Then he handed me a folder. "What's this information?" I opened it slowly. Inside were detailed reports about Ryan's financial situation. Debt expansions, loan defaults, private investigations. I looked up in shock. "You investigated him?" Alexander's expression remained calm. "The moment I realized he was dangerous to your emotional and financial stability, I didn't know whether to feel overwhelmed or touched. Maybe both." "You did all this for me?" "No," he corrected softly. "I did it for us." Us. That word still felt fragile, beautiful, terrifying. Then my phone buzzed across the breakfast table. A text from Chloe. "You think you won because you married him?" I stared at the message silently. Then another arrived. "He'll get bored of you too." For a brief second, old insecurities flared again. Too boring, too safe, too predictable. But then Alexander reached across the table and quietly turned my phone face down. "You don't owe broken people access to your peace." I looked at him slowly, and somewhere deep inside me, behind all the fear and damage and grief, something finally began healing. Marriage to Alexander Hayes did not magically erase my trauma. That's the part fairy tales never tell you. A kind man cannot instantly repair damage caused by years of betrayal. Some mornings, I still woke up anxious, still expected abandonment, still apologized too much. But Alexander never mocked those wounds. He simply stayed consistent long enough that my nervous system slowly stopped preparing for disaster every minute of the day. And honestly, that consistency drove Chloe insane. 2 months after our wedding, the city's social circles had fully turned our story into entertainment. Articles, rumors, charity event gossip. People debated whether I was lucky manipulative or secretly brilliant. Meanwhile, Chloe was unraveling publicly. She and Ryan fought constantly now. Vanessa Reed, who had once proudly defended Chloe online, suddenly started avoiding her at social events. Apparently, financial instability had made Ryan significantly less attractive. Shocking. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Alexander walked into his home office while I sat curled up on the couch reading. His expression looked colder than usual. "What happened?" I asked immediately. He loosened his tie slowly. "Your sister visited Hayes Global today." My stomach dropped. "She what?" "She requested a meeting." I stared at him in disbelief. "With you?" "Yes." Heat rushed into my face instantly. What did she want? Alexander's jaw shifted slightly. She claimed she needed closure. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because Chloe had never cared about closure in her life. She cared about access, opportunity, attention. Alexander walked toward the bar cart and poured himself whiskey before continuing. "She also implied your marriage is temporary." Pain flickered briefly through my chest despite myself. Trauma is strange that way. Even when you trust someone old, insecurities still know how to breathe. Alexander noticed immediately. He crossed the room calmly and sat beside me. "Summer." I looked down. "She said you married me impulsively because you were emotionally damaged." My throat tightened. "And what did you say?" His eyes held mine steadily. "I told her I married you because I admire your character." God, no one had ever defended me like that before. Not publicly, not privately, not consistently. I swallowed hard against the emotion rising in my throat. Then Alexander added quietly, "She also tried flirting with me. That part didn't even shock me anymore. It just exhausted me." "What did she do?" A faint look of disbelief crossed his face. "She touched my tie and suggested we understood each other better than you realize." I closed my eyes briefly. "Of course she did." Alexander leaned back slightly. "Then she implied you were emotionally fragile. That hurt more than the flirting somehow, because Chloe had spent my entire life rewriting my kindness into weakness." "She always does that," I whispered. Alexander studied me carefully. "She's afraid of you." I looked at him in confusion. "What, she always attacks your confidence? People only do that when they feel threatened." The idea sounded impossible. Threatened by me? I spent most of my life feeling invisible beside Chloe. But Alexander continued calmly. "Your sister depends on admiration from other people. You don't." I stared at him silently. "That makes you stronger than her." Before I could answer, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. He glanced at the screen, then calmly turned the phone toward me. Security footage. My stomach tightened instantly. The video showed Chloe standing inside Alexander's office earlier that afternoon. No audio, but body language told enough. She leaned too close, touched his arm repeatedly, smiled constantly. Then suddenly, Alexander stepped backward, creating distance, clear distance. Even through a security recording, his discomfort was obvious, and somehow seeing that affected me more than I expected. Because for the first time in my life, someone had the opportunity to choose Chloe over me, and didn't. Alexander watched my face carefully. "I wanted you to see it yourself." "Why? Because people like Chloe survive through manipulation?" His expression darkened slightly. "I don't ever want you questioning where you stand with me." That sentence settled somewhere deep inside my chest. Safe. I felt safe. Later that night, however, everything exploded. Because Ryan called me drunk again. This time, I answered accidentally while half asleep. "Summer," he slurred immediately, "you really married him." I sat upright in bed instantly. "Ryan, you know she still wants him, right?" My stomach twisted. "What are you talking about, Chloe?" His bitter laugh crackled through the phone. She never stopped chasing him. Alexander stirred beside me quietly, but didn't interrupt. Ryan continued talking recklessly. "You were just the backup plan." Every word sounded soaked in alcohol and resentment. She thought marrying me would eventually get her closer to Hayes. I closed my eyes painfully. Because deep down, I believed him. She told me once, Ryan muttered, that if Alexander Hayes ever looked at her seriously, she'd leave any man alive. Silence filled the room. Then Ryan laughed bitterly again. But he never wanted her. The sadness in his voice startled me. Not sympathy-worthy sadness, just pathetic realization, because suddenly Ryan understood what it felt like to be someone's second choice. I almost told him, "Now you know how I felt." But honestly, I was too tired. "Ryan," I whispered, "you destroyed your own life." Then I hung up. The room stayed silent afterward. Finally, Alexander spoke quietly beside me. "Are you all right?" I looked toward the dark ceiling. No, and that was the truth, because healing doesn't happen in straight lines. Some days you feel strong, other days, old wounds reopen unexpectedly. Alexander reached for my hand beneath the blankets. Steady, warm, present. "I'm sorry," he murmured. I frowned slightly. "For what?" "For the fact that your sister keeps forcing herself into your peace?" Emotion clogged my throat instantly. because nobody had ever apologized for hurting me unless they directly caused the pain. And even then, rarely. The next morning brought another disaster. A gossip site published photos of Chloe entering Alexander's office building. The headline read, "Billionaire's new wife already losing him to her own sister." I stared at the article in horror while social media exploded again. Thousands of comments, speculation, cruelty. My hands started shaking immediately. Old panic rushed back violently. Then Alexander walked into the kitchen, saw my expression, and took the phone gently from my hands. "I'll handle it." "How?" His expression turned frighteningly calm. The truth. By noon, Hayes Global released official legal notice threatening lawsuits against multiple gossip outlets for false reporting. Then something even more shocking happened. Alexander publicly confirmed that security footage existed disproving all rumors involving Chloe. The internet exploded again, but this time not against me, against her. And somewhere across Chicago, I knew my sister was finally realizing something terrifying. For the first time in her life, manipulation was no longer working. 3 days after the scandal involving Chloe and the gossip articles, my mother called me crying. Not soft crying, not emotional crying, strategic crying. I recognize the difference now. "Summer," Linda whispered shakily through the phone, "we need to fix this family." I stood silently inside the kitchen while rain tapped softly against the penthouse windows. The old version of me would have melted immediately, would have rushed to comfort her, would have sacrificed herself again to restore peace. But pain changes you, especially repeated pain. "What exactly are we fixing?" I asked calmly. Silence. Then, "Your father wants everyone together for dinner." I almost laughed. A family dinner, as if betrayal, humiliation, affairs, manipulation, and public scandals could all disappear over roast chicken and wine. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please," my mother whispered. "Your sister is struggling." There it was. Of course. Even now, after everything, the emotional focus remained. Chloe. Not me. Never me. "She's been crying constantly," Linda continued. "Ryan lost money. People are talking about her online. She's overwhelmed." I stared out the window silently. Interesting. When my wedding collapsed publicly, nobody organized emergency emotional support for me. Nobody begged Chloe to comfort me. Nobody cared that I couldn't breathe for weeks. But Chloe faces consequences. Once, suddenly, the whole family panics. Alexander entered the kitchen quietly carrying coffee, while I remained on the phone. One look at my expression, and he immediately understood. "Your mother," he mouthed. I nodded slightly. Linda's voice trembled again. "Please come tonight." I should have said no. Honestly, I wanted to. But another part of me, the exhausted daughter who spent her entire life begging to matter, equally needed to hear the truth out loud. Not implied, not hidden, spoken clearly. "Fine," I said finally. My mother exhaled in visible relief. "Thank you. No apology. Interesting." That evening, Alexander insisted on coming with me. "You don't have to," I told him while adjusting my coat. "Yes," he answered calmly, "I do." The drive to my parents' house felt strangely familiar. The same streets, the same neighborhoods, the same little coffee shop where my father once bought me hot chocolate after school when I was 10 years old. And suddenly, grief hit me unexpectedly. Because toxic families aren't evil every second. That's what makes them confusing. There are still memories you love buried inside the damage. When we arrived, every light inside the house was glowing warmly. From the outside, it looked normal, safe. But appearances had always been my family's favorite lie. The second we entered, tension swallowed the room instantly. My father stood near the dining table looking older than I remembered. My mother hovered anxiously beside the kitchen doorway. And Chloe sat silently near the fireplace wearing cream-colored cashmere like she was auditioning for sympathy. Ryan was there too. Of course he was. I stopped walking immediately. You didn't say Ryan would be here. Linda rushed forward. Please don't leave. Alexander's hand rested lightly against my back. Steadying, protective. Ryan looked terrible. Dark circles beneath his eyes. Wrinkled shirt. The polished confidence he once carried so effortlessly had disappeared completely. Good. For several awkward seconds, nobody spoke. Then Chloe looked at Alexander directly. Not me. Him. Thank you for coming. Alexander's face remained unreadable. I came for Summer. The atmosphere tightened instantly. My father cleared his throat nervously. Let's sit down. Dinner was unbearable from the beginning. Silverware clinked softly against plates while everyone pretended we were normal people discussing normal things. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Why am I actually here? Silence? My mother looked immediately toward Chloe. Again, always Chloe first. Then Ryan spoke quietly. I lost my apartment. I blinked slowly. What he looked down at the table. The debt situation got worse. Chloe crossed her arms defensively. We just need temporary help. I stared at them in disbelief. Temporary help. Oh my God, this wasn't a reconciliation dinner. This was an ambush. My mother finally spoke carefully. Alexander has financial connections. I laughed. Actually laughed, not happily. In disbelief. You invited me here to ask my husband to rescue the man who cheated on me with my sister. My father looked ashamed immediately. Linda burst into tears. We're desperate. I looked at Chloe. You're unbelievable. She rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, please stop acting morally superior. That sentence shattered the final thread of restraint inside me. Morally superior, I whispered. You slept with my fiancé. You married a billionaire 3 months later. There it was, the truth. Chloe didn't believe love existed, only transactions, which meant she could never understand my relationship with Alexander because she assumed every human connection worked the way hers did. I looked directly at my mother. Did you know this dinner was about money? Linda hesitated. That hesitation answered everything. My chest tightened painfully. Even now, even after everything, they still saw me as useful before they saw me as human. Then my father quietly spoke for the first time all evening. We made mistakes. I turned toward him slowly. Mistakes? His eyes filled with tears. We should have protected you. The pain in his voice almost broke me, because unlike my mother, my father finally sounded honest. Too late, but honest. Meanwhile, Chloe suddenly snapped. Oh my God, enough with the guilt. She pointed directly at me. Summer always does this. She plays the victim until everyone worships her. I stared at her in disbelief. You destroyed my wedding. You were boring. The room went silent instantly. There it was. Raw. Ugly. Honest. Chloe's breathing grew sharper as years of jealousy finally spilled out. You think being dependable makes you special? She snapped. People pity you, Summer. That's not the same as loving you. My mother whispered sharply. Chloe. But Chloe kept going. No, I'm serious. She acts like she's better than everyone because she suffers quietly. Then she looked at Alexander. You don't even know who she really is. Before I could answer, Alexander finally spoke. Calm. Controlled. Terrifyingly calm. I know exactly who she is. Chloe froze. Alexander leaned back slightly in his chair. She's the only person at this table who spent years loving people that continuously failed her. Silence swallowed the room whole. My throat tightened instantly. Alexander continued evenly. And somehow, she still arrived here tonight, willing to listen instead of punish. My mother started crying harder. My father lowered his head completely. But Chloe's face hardened with fury. Because she realized something devastating. Alexander didn't admire her performance, he admired my endurance. Then he calmly reached into his jacket pocket and placed his phone onto the table. I also know something else. Ryan's expression changed immediately. Fear. Alexander tapped the screen once. An audio recording began playing softly across the dining room. Chloe's voice filled the silence. If Alexander Hayes ever wanted me, I'd leave Ryan immediately. Ryan went completely pale. And suddenly, for the first time in my entire life, my sister looked afraid. The dining room went completely silent after the recording ended. Not ordinary silence, the kind that changes relationships permanently. Ryan stared at Chloe like he had never truly seen her before. My mother looked physically ill, and my father slowly removed his glasses, rubbing one trembling hand over his face like he suddenly aged 10 years in 30 seconds. Meanwhile, Chloe sat frozen beside the fireplace. For once in her life, she had no immediate performance ready. No tears, no charm, no manipulation, just panic. "What the hell is this?" Ryan whispered hoarsely. Alexander answered calmly. "A recording from your girlfriend's visit to my office." Chloe finally found her voice. "You recorded me?" "Yes. That's insane." "No," Alexander replied evenly. "What's insane is repeatedly harassing a married man." The shame that crossed Chloe's face lasted only a second before rage replaced it. She stood abruptly from the table. "You planned this." Alexander didn't blink. "No, you created this." Ryan looked like someone had punched him directly in the chest. "You said you loved me." Chloe laughed sharply. "Oh, please, Ryan. You cheated on Summer with me. Did you really think this relationship was built on integrity?" The cruelty in her voice stunned even me, because suddenly I realized something terrifying. Chloe didn't just betray people. She despised weakness in anyone who trusted her. Ryan stood slowly. "You used me. You used Summer first." That hit him hard. Good. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then my mother burst into tears again. "Stop this. Please stop." But the truth had already escaped, and once truth enters a room, nothing returns to normal afterward. Ryan looked at me suddenly. His eyes were desperate now, raw. "I made mistakes," he whispered. I stared at him in disbelief. Mistakes. Still mistakes. Not manipulation, not betrayal. Mistakes. "You were going to marry me while sleeping with my sister," I said quietly. Ryan swallowed hard. "I know. You used my inheritance to plan your financial future." His silence answered everything. Then something even uglier surfaced. Ryan turned toward Chloe slowly. "You told me Alexander would never notice Summer." My stomach tightened instantly. Interesting. Very interesting. Chloe crossed her arms defensively. "Well, I was wrong." "No," Ryan snapped bitterly. "You told me she wasn't the kind of woman powerful men wanted." The room shifted, because suddenly everyone could see it. This was never just jealousy. Chloe needed me beneath her, always. If I became desirable, respected, chosen, her entire identity cracked apart. My mother whispered weakly, "Chloe." But Chloe exploded before she could continue. "Why is everyone acting like I'm the only bad person here?" She pointed directly at me. "Summer spent her entire life making everyone feel guilty." I blinked slowly. What you think being quiet and sad makes you a saint. The room stayed frozen while years of resentment poured out of her. You always played the perfect daughter, the dependable daughter, the selfless daughter. Her voice shook violently now. And everyone compared me to you. I stared at her in disbelief. Compared my entire life had been spent in Chloe's shadow. But trauma distorts reality. And suddenly I realized something devastating. Chloe truly believed she was the victim, because people like her interpret boundaries as cruelty whenever they stop benefiting. You had Mom and Dad wrapped around your finger? I whispered. She laughed harshly. No, you just made them feel guilty all the time. My father finally spoke sharply. That's enough. Everyone turned. George West looked directly at Chloe for the first time all evening, and there was no softness left in his face. We failed, Summer. The room went still. My mother immediately whispered George no. His voice cracked heavily. No more protecting this. Tears filled his eyes as he looked at me. You spent your whole life carrying this family. Emotion slammed into me unexpectedly hard, because my father had never said those words out loud before, not once, and somehow hearing them now hurt almost worse than never hearing them at all. He continued, shakily, When Chloe struggled, you sacrificed. His voice broke. When your mother panicked, you comforted her. He looked down at his hands. And every time you were hurt, we expected you to survive quietly. My mother covered her face, crying. Meanwhile, Chloe looked furious, unbelievable. She stood abruptly. So now, everyone worshipped Summer because she married a billionaire. There it was again. Money, status, competition. She genuinely couldn't understand why Alexander loved me, because she believed value came from winning. Then Alexander spoke calmly beside me. I didn't marry Summer because she suffered. Chloe froze. Alexander's eyes never left hers. I married her because she remained kind after suffering. That sentence shattered something inside the room. Because suddenly, the difference between us became painfully obvious. Chloe used pain as justification for cruelty. I used pain to protect other people from feeling alone. And deep down, everyone knew it. Then Vanessa Reed suddenly walked into the dining room. I blinked in shock. Apparently, my mother had invited her too. Vanessa looked deeply uncomfortable. Sorry, she muttered awkwardly. I didn't realize this was happening now. Chloe looked horrified. Vanessa, don't. Interesting. Vanessa avoided her eyes completely. Then she looked directly at Ryan. You deserve to know something. Chloe stood instantly. Don't you dare. But Vanessa was already talking. Chloe told me months ago that if Alexander Hayes ever showed interest in her, she'd dump you immediately. Ryan's face went white. Vanessa swallowed hard. She said you were temporary until something better came along. Chloe exploded. You lying little bitch, Vanessa flinched backward. But for the first time, nobody rushed to defend Chloe. Not my mother. Not my father. Not Ryan. Nobody. Because everyone was finally exhausted. Exhausted from protecting someone who destroyed every person who loved her. Ryan laughed suddenly. A broken laugh. Oh my God. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. And I watched realization destroy him in real time. Not because he loved me deeply enough. Because he finally understood what it felt like to be disposable. I ruined my life, he whispered. I felt strangely calm hearing it. Not victorious. Just finished. Ryan stepped toward me slowly. Summer, if I could take everything back, you can't. My voice remained steady. He looked devastated. Good. Not because I wanted revenge, because accountability finally entered the room. Then Chloe suddenly pointed at Alexander furiously. "You think she's special? Eventually she'll bore you too." The old me would have shattered hearing that. The new me simply looked at her quietly, because suddenly I understood something life-changing. Chloe never attacked my weaknesses. She attacked my strengths until I stopped believing in them. Alexander reached for my hand calmly, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel chosen because someone settled. I felt chosen because someone saw me clearly. Then I stood up slowly from the table. "I'm done." My mother immediately panicked. "Summer, please no." I looked around the room one final time. At my crying mother, my ashamed father, my broken ex-fiancé, my furious sister. And honestly, I felt sad for all of them. Because they spent years destroying relationships while I spent years trying to preserve them. And somehow, I still ended up happier. After the dinner disaster, I didn't speak to my family for almost 6 weeks. Not because Alexander told me to cut them off. He never controlled me that way. He simply respected my silence. And honestly, silence became peaceful. No manipulation, no guilt, no constant pressure to make everyone else comfortable. For the first time in my life, I started waking up without emotional dread sitting in my chest. Healing feels strange when you're used to surviving. At first, peace almost feels suspicious. One snowy Sunday morning, I stood barefoot in Alexander's kitchen, making coffee while soft jazz played quietly through the penthouse speakers. Outside Chicago looked silver and calm beneath winter clouds. Alexander walked in wearing gray sweatpants and reading glasses half focused on financial reports in his hand. It was such an ordinary moment, and somehow, that ordinary safety nearly made me cry. He noticed immediately. "You're thinking too hard again." I smiled weakly. "Sorry." Alexander walked closer slowly, then gently touched my chin. "Stop apologizing for existing." God. Even months later, hearing kindness still startled me. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed against the counter. "Mom." I stared at the screen silently. Alexander didn't ask questions. He simply poured coffee and waited. Eventually, I answered. Linda sounded exhausted. Not dramatic, not manipulative, just tired. "Summer, can I see you?" Every instinct told me no, but another quieter part of me needed closure. "1 hour," I said finally. That afternoon, I met my mother alone at a small cafe near Lincoln Park. The second I saw her, my chest tightened painfully. She looked older, smaller somehow, like guilt had physically aged her. For several awkward seconds, neither of us spoke. Then my mother burst into tears immediately. "I'm sorry." Simple words, words I had waited my entire life to hear. And somehow, they still hurt. I stirred my coffee slowly. "For what exactly?" Linda wiped her eyes shakily. "For failing you?" The honesty stunned me silent. She looked down at the table. "I spent so many years protecting Chloe that I stopped seeing what it was doing to you." Tears burned unexpectedly behind my eyes. Because hearing the truth out loud changes something, especially after years of emotional denial. "She always needed more," my mother whispered. "And I convinced myself you were strong enough to survive less." My throat tightened painfully. "That wasn't strength, Mom." She nodded immediately through tears. "I know that now." Silence settled heavily between us. Then she whispered something that nearly broke me completely. "You were the easier daughter to neglect because you loved us anyway." I looked away immediately before she saw the tears falling. Because deep down, that was true. My love made me convenient, and convenience often becomes exploitation inside unhealthy families. My mother reached carefully across the table. I don't expect forgiveness. I stared at her trembling hand for several seconds, then finally said the truth. I forgive you. Her face crumpled instantly. But that doesn't mean things go back to normal. That part clearly hurt her. Good. Not because I wanted revenge, because boundaries finally mattered. Later that evening, my father showed up unexpectedly outside the penthouse. Alone. Alexander opened the door himself. The two men stood there awkwardly for several seconds before my father quietly said, "I came to talk to my daughter." Alexander simply nodded and stepped aside. No ego, no power games, just respect. That difference still amazed me. My father sat nervously in the living room, holding his winter coat tightly across his lap. I don't know how to do this, he admitted quietly. Neither did I. For most of my life, my father loved through silence. Unfortunately, silence protects the wrong people more often than it protects the right ones. Finally, he looked directly at me. I should have defended you. Emotion clogged my throat instantly. When his eyes filled with tears, all of it. The simplicity of that answer shattered me more than dramatic speeches could have. I saw things, he whispered. I saw your mother favor Chloe. I saw you carrying burdens that weren't yours. His voice cracked heavily, and I kept telling myself peace mattered more than confrontation. I looked down slowly. That wasn't peace, Dad. I know. God, that sentence. I know. Too late. But real. Then he said something unexpected. Chloe moved out. I blinked. What, she blamed everyone after the dinner? Apparently, Chloe spent days screaming at my parents, accusing them of choosing me after years of protecting her. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so tragic. She says you ruined her life, my father admitted quietly. I almost laughed. She ruined her own life. Yes, he whispered painfully. But Chloe's never been able to face herself honestly. That was true. People like Chloe survive through external validation. Without admiration, attention, or competition, they collapse internally. My father looked around the penthouse quietly. Then his eyes softened. He's good to you? I glanced toward Alexander's office down the hallway. Yes. My father nodded slowly. You deserve that. Those 4 words healed something old inside me. Not completely, but enough. A week later, Ryan tried contacting me again, this time sober. He asked to meet privately. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Not because I wanted reconciliation, because I needed final closure. We met at a quiet diner downtown. Ryan looked exhausted, older. The confidence that once made him attractive had completely disappeared. For several moments, he simply stared at me. Then finally whispered, I really loved you. I looked at him calmly. No, I said softly. You loved what I gave you. Pain crossed his face instantly, because deep down, he knew I was right. I ruined the best thing in my life. I believed that part, but consequences aren't erased by regret. Ryan swallowed hard. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I thought carefully before answering. Then finally said, I already did. Hope flickered briefly across his expression. Until I continued. But forgiveness doesn't mean I want you back. That distinction changed everything. Because for most of my life, forgiveness meant surrender. Now it meant freedom. Ryan looked shattered hearing it. And strangely, I didn't feel victorious, just peaceful. That night, I stood beside the penthouse windows, watching snow fall softly over Chicago, while Alexander wrapped his arms around me from behind. Warm, steady, safe. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I leaned back against him slowly. Yeah, and for the first time in years, I actually meant it, because somewhere along the way, I stopped needing to defeat Chloe to feel valuable. I stopped needing my parents' approval to feel lovable. I stopped needing Ryan's regret to heal. And honestly, that freedom felt better than revenge ever could. A year after my wedding to Alexander Hayes, we left Chicago. Not because we were running away, because for the first time in my life, I finally understood the difference between surviving somewhere and belonging somewhere. We moved to Seattle in early spring. The mornings smelled like rain and salt water there. Mountains stood quietly in the distance like ancient guardians, and the air felt softer somehow. Slower. Kinder. Alexander bought a modern home overlooking Puget Sound, but honestly the house itself mattered less than what existed inside it. Peace. Real peace. Not silence filled with tension. Not fake harmony maintained through emotional sacrifice. Actual peace. The kind where nobody punished you for breathing too loudly. The kind where love didn't have to be earned through suffering. Most mornings I woke before Alexander and sat near the giant kitchen windows, drinking coffee, while sunlight spread slowly across the water. Those moments became sacred to me, because for years my nervous system only understood chaos. Now I was learning calm, and strangely enough, calm terrified me at first. Healing always does. About 6 months after moving, I started volunteering at a women's recovery center focused on emotional abuse and betrayal trauma. At first, I only intended to help temporarily. Then one woman told me her husband cheated with her best friend while her family blamed her for overreacting. And suddenly, I saw myself sitting across from me. After that, I couldn't walk away. Eventually, with Alexander's support, I opened a foundation called The West House. The name was intentional, not because I wanted to honor my family, because I wanted to reclaim the part of myself they almost destroyed. We offered counseling, emergency housing assistance, and legal support for women rebuilding their lives after emotional manipulation and betrayal. The first day the center officially opened, I cried alone in my office for nearly 20 minutes. Not from sadness, from disbelief. Because the woman who once begged to be loved properly had somehow become strong enough to help other women remember their worth too. Alexander found me afterward sitting quietly at my desk. "You're crying." "I know." "Good tears." I laughed softly through tears. "Yeah." He walked over slowly and kissed my forehead. "I'm proud of you." Simple words. But when spoken sincerely, simple words change lives. That was the thing about Alexander. He never loved loudly for attention. He loved consistently in private, through actions, through safety, through respect. One evening that summer, while we sat outside watching the sunset stain the ocean gold and orange, I asked him something I had been afraid to ask for months. "Did you ever worry I only married you because you were rich?" Alexander looked genuinely confused. "No." I stared at him. Not even once. He smiled faintly. Some wealthy people spend their entire lives around people chasing money. His fingers brushed gently against mine. "You looked uncomfortable the first time you entered my world?" I laughed quietly. "That obvious you apologized to a waiter because someone else spilled water." God. We both laughed then, but afterward, his expression softened. "You never wanted my money." His eyes held mine steadily. "You wanted safety." That sentence nearly broke me all over again. Because yes, that was exactly what I wanted. Not luxury, not status. Safety. And somehow, after years of emotional starvation, safety became the most romantic thing I had ever experienced. Then one rainy October morning, I received a letter from Chloe. Not a text, not social media drama, a handwritten letter. My hands shook opening it. The paper smelled faintly like expensive perfume I recognized immediately. Summer, I don't expect forgiveness. Honestly, I'm not even sure I deserve it. For a long time, I convinced myself you were weak, because admitting you were stronger than me would have destroyed me. You loved people without controlling them. You gave without making everything transactional. And I hated you for that. I spent years trying to steal things from you because I thought winning would finally make me feel important. But every time I got what I wanted, I still felt empty. Ryan left 6 months ago. Mom barely speaks to me now. Dad tries, but I know I disappointed him. And the worst part is finally understanding that none of this was ever really about you. I was angry at myself long before I became cruel to you. I saw photos of your foundation online. You look happy. Actually happy. I don't think I've ever truly seen that before. Maybe Alexander was right about one thing. Maybe kindness is strength. Chloe. I reread the letter 3 times. Not because it erased the past. Nothing could. But because for the first time in her life, Chloe sounded honest. Not manipulative, not performing, just tired. Human. Alexander found me sitting silently by the windows afterward. What happened? I handed him the letter quietly. He read it carefully, then looked at me. How do you feel? I thought about that honestly. Finally, I answered free. Because forgiveness is strange. People think it means pretending nothing happened. It doesn't. Forgiveness means the pain no longer owns your future. That night, I stood barefoot on our balcony, wrapped in one of Alexander's sweaters, while cold ocean wind brushed through my hair. Seattle glowed softly beneath the darkness. Behind me, I heard Alexander slide the balcony door open. Then his arms wrapped around my waist gently, warm, steady, home. And suddenly, I thought about the woman I used to be. The woman standing outside that hotel suite in her wedding coat while white roses fell across the hallway floor. Back then, losing Ryan felt like the end of my life. Now I understand something completely different. Sometimes the most painful betrayals are also rescues. Because if my sister had never stolen my fiancé, I might have spent my entire life begging small people to love me correctly. Instead, I learned to love myself enough to stop settling for emotional crumbs. And honestly, that became the greatest revenge of all. Not marrying a billionaire, not watching Chloe lose, not hearing Ryan regret everything. The greatest revenge was finally building a life where nobody had to lose for me to feel worthy. Word count 173 words. Ketuk fan moilam. After everything that happened, I learned something painful but important. Some people will only love you as long as your light stays dim enough for them to shine brighter. The moment you begin valuing yourself, unhealthy people become uncomfortable. For years, I thought love meant sacrifice. I thought being the good daughter meant staying quiet while other people hurt me. I thought forgiveness meant accepting bad behavior over and over again. But real love does not ask you to destroy yourself to keep other people comfortable. Real love protects your peace. Real love tells the truth. Real love chooses you consistently, not only when you're useful, easy, or convenient. And sometimes the hardest lesson of all is realizing that family can wound you deeply while still believing they love you. That doesn't mean you must continue allowing the harm. Boundaries are not cruelty. Walking away from emotional manipulation is not selfishness. Choosing yourself is not betrayal. If you are watching this right now and you've ever been cheated on, replaced, manipulated, or made to feel not enough, I need you to hear me clearly. Someone else's inability to value you properly is not proof that you are unlovable. Please remember that. And if this story touched your heart even a little, I'd truly love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved in order to save yourself? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I read more comments than you know, and sometimes strangers heal each other in ways family never could. And if you enjoy emotional storytelling like this, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep sharing these journeys together. No matter what you've survived, I hope you never stop believing that peace is possible.